Chapter 27 of the Acts of the Apostles has a very dramatic account that tells us about a sea journey that St. Paul took. He was being taken to Italy as a prisoner to stand trial before Caesar. This lengthy episode entails their setting sail for Rome, the weather turning treacherous, their continuing the voyage despite wise advice to do otherwise, and amazingly their being shipwrecked without any casualties. Besides being historically true, it's also a story that tells us how to look at our own life. The literary motif of the long sea voyage is as old as literature itself. For example, I know that you're familiar with the epic story of Homer's Odyssey. But in the Bible, there are two great sea voyages. Recently, we heard the story of the book of Jonah, and then there is Noah's Ark in the book of Genesis. The sea voyage, the long journey, symbolizes our longing for fulfillment and our yearning to go home. And the ability to survive this long and treacherous sea voyage is an indication of one's courage and desire. So Paul's story in the Acts of the Apostles intends to lead us to the meaning that we seek. What happens to the characters in Paul's accounts happens to us as well. For we are very much involved in the story, believe it or not. At the beginning of this story, even though the weather conditions indicate an impending disaster, the crew chooses to press on with the voyage. Now, how often do we allow ourselves to be ruled by our own ideas and plans? And we stick to what we want to do, even when the evidence indicates otherwise. Still, God's compassion reaches out to our stubbornness. The Lord, in His mercy, puts in our lives individuals who try to speak sense to us. In this story, as the circumstances of the sailors' lives turned catastrophic, God provided someone who offered them a new way and true way of looking at reality so that they could live in hope. This someone, who happens to be St. Paul, first begins with a warning to the crew. He says, "I can see that this voyage will result in severe damage and heavy loss." At that moment, St. Paul, who is a prisoner in the hold of the ship, chained down below, is no longer just a prisoner, but unbeknownst to them, he's a witness. Someone that God is using. Someone who makes them aware, or tries to make them aware, of something greater than themselves. And the knowledge that results when we listen to a witness is what we call faith. But at his first warning, the sailors didn't believe Paul. And you know what? Sometimes we don't listen to God when He tries to speak to us. But does God give up on us? He does not. Yet we need, in order to listen to God, we need to reach a point in which we truly need and want God's help. And how does that happen? In the story, it's when they reach a point, and this is the exact words, when neither the sun nor the stars were visible for many days. They are in total darkness, and in such darkness, they lose all hope of surviving. They are in despair. Experience shows us that such moments like these are prime occasions for the Lord to reveal his salvation to us. So, in their darkness and in their despair, Paul speaks a second time from below. And this is what they hear. Do not be afraid. Keep up your courage. Astoundingly, at this perilous moment, the centurion, the sailors, and the soldiers all listen to this least likely person, the one who's the prisoner bound in chains in the hold of the ship. And as I said before, it's the voice of St. Paul speaking to them a second time. And this time, they heed his voice and they reach the shore safely. Now, all Paul does is announce God's plan, but it's the authority, it's the conviction with which he speaks that's exceptional. And authority is someone who prevents us from giving in to our own reason by helping us recognize the mystery of God's work that's trying to penetrate our life. At the conclusion of our novena prayers, particularly the second and the third, we speak to Mary and we say, I fear, dear Mother, that in the time of danger I may neglect to call on you and lose my soul. We pray similar words in the third novena prayer. I fear, O Mother, that in the hour of temptation I may through negligence fail to have recourse to you and thus perish miserably. What are we doing? We're speaking to one whom we believe is our advocate, our hope, and our refuge. Someone who hears us and speaks courage to us at those moments when on our voyage in life we are threatened by a storm whose darkness seemingly overwhelms us to the point of despair. Mary has the power to save us because she believed the words God spoke to her throughout her life. And because she believed that what was said to her would come to be, she has the authority to help us and to say with confidence, do not be afraid. Keep up your courage. Mary speaks sense to us. Her wisdom offers us a new and true way of looking at reality when it threatens us, so that we can live in hope. Her grace, her intercession, her intervention prevents us from giving in to our own reason by always helping us at those times of need to recognize the mystery of God's love at work in our lives.